You know what's crazy about corporate life? Sometimes you pour your entire soul into a project, and nobody seems to notice. That's how it felt during those 4 brutal months I spent working on the Henderson account. I'm talking 80-hour weeks, midnight oil burning so bright my apartment probably looked like a lighthouse to the neighbors. My friends stopped inviting me places because my answer was always the same. Sorry, gotta work on Henderson. Let me paint you a picture. Me, Amelia Turner, 32, hunched over my laptop at 2 a.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and takeout containers. My cat, Felix, giving me that judgmental look cats perfect around the 3rd consecutive day you've forgotten to change their water. My social life? What social life? Dating apps, gathering digital dust on my phone. My mother leaving increasingly concerned voicemails. Honey, are you still alive? But that's the thing about dedication. When you're in it, you're in it. I believed in this project. The Henderson account wasn't just another client. They were revolutionizing sustainable packaging in the food industry. Something that actually mattered, you know? So I pushed harder, researched deeper, and crafted the most comprehensive market strategy they'd ever seen. The final presentation day arrived, and I was running on fumes and faith. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked through my meticulously prepared slides. The Henderson executives nodded, smiled, asked challenging questions I answered with surprising clarity given my sleep-deprived state. When it ended, they applauded. Not that polite, awkward corporate clap, but real applause. Mr. Henderson himself stood up and said, "This is exactly what we needed. Thank you, Amelia." 2 days later, it happened. An email notification popped up on my screen from Robert Henderson himself. My heart did a little jump. Executives rarely follow up personally. I opened it, expecting a formal thank you at best. "Dear Amelia," it read, "your exceptional work has transformed how we view our market position. As a token of my personal appreciation, I'd like to offer you something I know you'll value." I scrolled down. Attached were 2 front-row tickets to the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl. Not just any tickets. Front row, 50-yard line, the kind normal humans don't get access to. I nearly fell out of my chair. You have to understand. I'm that person who schedules their entire year around football season. My apartment is decorated in my team's colors. I've got signed memorabilia carefully displayed like museum pieces. My family knows not to call me during games unless someone's in the hospital. And now, front row Super Bowl tickets? I printed the email, yes, actually printed it, and just stared at it. 4 months of sacrifice, of missing birthdays and date nights and sleep, suddenly felt worth it. This wasn't just a corporate gift. This was recognition of everything I'd poured into the project. This was someone seeing my value. The rest of the day, I floated around the office. Who would I take? My dad? My best friend? Should I book the hotel now? What would I wear? For the first time in months, I felt that bubbling excitement that makes your cheeks hurt from smiling too much. Little did I know, someone else had noticed my excitement and the printed email sitting on my desk. Someone who had contributed exactly nothing to the Henderson project, but was about to try taking everything. Sometimes the universe gives you beautiful rewards for your hard work, and sometimes it gives you a lesson about the darker side of corporate culture, wrapped in an opportunity for the sweetest kind of justice. I should have known something was off when James, my supervisor and the human embodiment of taking credit for other people's work, called me into his office the next morning. He had that smile, you know? That particular smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the one that screams, "I'm about to do something awful but will act like I'm doing you a favor." "Amelia, just the person I wanted to see," he chirped, leaning back in, his ergonomic chair that cost more than my monthly rent. "I noticed you received something from Robert Henderson yesterday." My stomach dropped faster than an elevator with cut cables. I hadn't even told anyone about the tickets yet. except Jen, from accounting, who I'd squealed to in the break room, but somehow James knew. Yes, I said cautiously. Mr. Henderson sent me Super Bowl tickets as a thank you for my work on the project. James's smile widened, showing too many teeth. About that, I've been meaning to talk to you. He picked up a pen, twirling it between his fingers like a tiny baton. Those tickets weren't actually meant for you personally. I blinked. What? The email was addressed to me specifically. It literally said, "Dear Amelia," and mentioned my work. Well, yes, but you see, you were representing the company. Any gifts from clients technically belong to Westridge Consulting. As a whole. His voice had that practiced, condescending tone he used when explaining company policy. Policies that seemed to materialize out of thin air whenever convenient for him. I'm afraid I'll need those tickets, he continued, holding out his hand as if I carried them around in my pocket. It's a strategic decision. We've been trying to land Peterson Investments for months, and Barry Peterson is a huge football fan. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. James, these were a personal gift for my work. Your work as an employee of this company, he interrupted. Look, I understand you're disappointed, but this is how corporate gifts work. We can't have employees accepting valuable gifts from clients. It's a conflict of interest. The absolute audacity. The tickets were worth thousands, but the principal was worth more. This was my recognition, my reward for 4 months of sacrifices. I've already emailed Henderson thanking him for the company gift, James added with a smirk that made my blood boil. And I've scheduled lunch with Peterson for this afternoon to tell him the good news. This could be huge for the company, Amelia. You should be proud. Proud? Proud. I wanted to flip his stupid designer desk. Instead, I took a deep breath. So you'll be taking Peterson to the Super Bowl? Well, that was the plan, but... He glanced at his watch, an unnecessary gesture of importance. Peterson had to reschedule our lunch. But don't worry, the tickets won't go to waste. My brother-in-law is a huge football fan too. And there it was, the truth. Not for a client, not for the company, but for himself and his lousy brother-in-law. He was stealing my reward for personal use while disguising it as a business decision. I left his office in a fog of rage and disbelief. In the hallway, I passed Andrea Holloway, our VP, who asked if I was okay. I managed a weak smile and mumbled something about being fine. But I wasn't fine. I was furious, humiliated, and worst of all, powerless. Or so James thought. Back at my desk, I stared at my computer screen, not really seeing it. People don't realize how dangerous intelligent women can be when they're underestimated. James had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He'd assumed I would roll over and accept this injustice. He'd assumed wrong. Dead wrong. When you've been repeatedly underestimated your entire career, you develop a certain patience, a willingness to play the long game. That afternoon, as I sat at my desk watching James strut around the office like a peacock who'd just been crowned king, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes with absolute clarity of purpose. I waited until 5:30 p.m., when most of the office had cleared out. Then I pulled out my phone and composed the most important text message of my professional life. My fingers hovered over the keys for just a moment before I began typing to Robert Henderson. Mr. Henderson, I wanted to sincerely thank you again for your incredibly generous gesture with the Super Bowl tickets. I was so touched by your personal recognition of my work on the project. Just a quick heads up that you might receive a thank you. From my supervisor James Bailey as well. He was quite excited when I shared the news with the team. I hit send and waited. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Amelia, you're more than welcome. Your work was exceptional. But I'm confused. Why would your supervisor be thanking me? The tickets were a personal gift to you specifically. Perfect. The hook was set. Time to reel it in, gently. Oh, I assumed he was just being polite since you're such an important client. He mentioned something about company policy regarding client gifts and strategic opportunities with other clients. I'm still learning all the corporate rules. In any case, I'm incredibly grateful you thought of me. I could almost hear the gears turning in Henderson's mind through the silence that followed. When the reply came, it was exactly what I'd hoped. That doesn't sound right at all. Those tickets were meant for you, not your company. Has someone suggested otherwise? I'd like to clear this up immediately. I crafted my reply carefully, making sure to sound confused rather than accusatory. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. James mentioned company policy about client gifts, needing to be used for business purposes. He's planning to take them to entertain a potential investor. Please don't worry about it. Your recognition of my work means everything, tickets or not. The response was immediate. This is absolutely unacceptable. I'll handle it. And Amelia? Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Please don't say anything to James. I'd like to address this personally. I put my phone down, a small smile playing at my lips. In chess, this would be called developing your pieces, moving them into position before the decisive strike. James had no idea what was coming. The next morning, James was practically floating around the office. He stopped by my desk, coffee in hand, wearing that insufferable grin. Amelia just wanted to check in on the Henderson follow-up materials, and hey, he lowered his voice conspiratorially. Between us, do you think a Broncos jersey would be too much for the Super Bowl? My brother-in-law is a die-hard fan. I smiled sweetly. I think you should wear whatever makes you comfortable, James. Great advice. He chuckled, completely missing the cold edge in my voice. Oh, and we've got that client meeting on Monday morning. Henderson wants to discuss expanding the project. Make sure you're prepared, okay? Monday. So that was when Henderson planned to strike. I nodded, my face a mask of professional courtesy. I'll be ready. Over the weekend, I gathered intelligence through the company grapevine. James had booked a flight to Phoenix. He'd reserved a luxury hotel on the company card. He'd bragged to 3 different colleagues about his Super Bowl plans. Each detail was a nail in his professional coffin, and he was hammering them in himself. Sunday evening, I received a text from Henderson. All set for tomorrow. Be prepared for some fireworks. I replied with just 2 words. I'm ready. That night, I laid out my sharpest suit and got a solid 8 hours of sleep for the first time in months. While James would be nursing a Super Bowl hangover tomorrow, I'd be clear-eyed and ready for the most important meeting of my career. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting ahead. The Monday after the Super Bowl dawned bright and clear, a perfect metaphor for what was about to happen in our conference room. I arrived at the office early, brewing a pot of the good coffee we usually save for client meetings, a small indulgence to celebrate what was coming. James rolled in at 9:15, 15 minutes before the Henderson meeting. He looked rough, red-rimmed, eyes behind designer glasses, skin with the particular pallor that comes from too much stadium beer and not enough sleep. His normally immaculate suit was slightly rumpled, like he'd pulled it from the bottom of a suitcase and hoped no one would notice. Wild game, huh? I said pleasantly as he poured himself a large coffee. He startled slightly, then recovered with a smirk. Absolutely incredible. Best seats I've ever had. You could practically feel the tackles from where we were sitting, front. Row really is something special, I agreed, watching him carefully. Must have been worth the flight back this morning. Had to be here for Henderson, he said with a dismissive wave. Business first, right? Speaking of which, did you prepare those projection charts I asked for? I smiled. Everything's ready in the conference room. What I didn't tell him was what else was ready in the conference room. Like a ticking time bomb with his name on it. At precisely 9:30, Robert Henderson walked through our office doors with 2 other executives I recognized from the initial presentation. Andrea Holloway, our VP, greeted them warmly and ushered everyone, into the conference room where James and I were already waiting. "James! Amelia!" Henderson boomed, shaking our hands. "Great to see you both." His eyes lingered on James with an unreadable expression. "How was your weekend, James?" "Productive," James replied smoothly. "Lots of prep for today's meeting." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The sheer audacity. "Interesting," Henderson said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Before we dive into the expansion plans, I wanted to follow up on something." He looked directly at James. "Did you enjoy the Super Bowl yesterday?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. James's face froze in a half-smile, his eyes darting quickly to me, then back to Henderson. It was because those tickets," Henderson continued, his voice deceptively casual, "were intended as a personal gift for Amelia, for her exceptional work on our project." Andrea Holloway's head snapped toward James, her expression hardening. "James? What's this about?" James cleared his throat, buying time. "There was clearly a misunderstanding. Company policy states that gifts from clients are considered company property. I was simply following protocol by reallocating the tickets for business development purposes." "Business development?" Henderson raised an eyebrow. "Was your brother-in-law considering a major investment in our company then?" The blood drained from James's face. He shot another accusatory glance my way, but I kept my expression neutral, interested, as if this dramatic revelation was news to me too. That's not... Who told you?" "No one needed to tell me." Henderson cut in. "You posted 12 photos on Instagram. Your brother-in-law tagged you in 17 more, thanking the best brother-in-law ever for the awesome Super Bowl experience." Not exactly subtle, James. Andrea's expression had moved from confusion to thunderous. "You told me you were entertaining. The Peterson account at the Super Bowl. You submitted expense reports for the hotel and meals." The walls were closing in on James. I could see the desperate calculations behind his eyes as he searched for an escape route that didn't exist. "Amelia," Henderson turned to me. "Did James tell you he was taking these tickets that were explicitly addressed to you?" All eyes turned to me. This was my moment, the culmination of my carefully laid trap. I could destroy James with one word. Instead, I hesitated, as if reluctant to cause trouble. "He mentioned something about company policy regarding client gifts, said they needed to be used strategically. And did he mention that he intended to take his brother-in-law rather than a client or colleague?" I widened my eyes innocently. No, he didn't share those details with me. The beauty of this moment wasn't in what I said, but in what I didn't have to say. The truth was doing all the damage for me. And as I watched James's professional reputation crumble in real time, I felt no joy, only the quiet satisfaction of justice being served. The meeting was far from over, but the explosion had only just begun. The conference room felt like a courtroom now, with James squirming in the defendant's chair. Andrea Holloway, our VP, had transitioned from confused to coldly furious in the span of 5 minutes. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, each word precisely measured. "You intercepted a personal gift meant for Amelia, claimed it as company property when it was clearly addressed to her individually, then used it for personal entertainment while charging the company for related expenses." James loosened his collar, sweat beading at his temples despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Andrea, if I could explain—" "Please do," she interrupted, folding her hands on the conference table. "I'm fascinated to hear how this could possibly be explained." He glanced around the room, desperate for an ally and finding none. "The Henderson account is one of our biggest. Any gifts related to this business relationship fall under company purview. I made an executive decision based on what?" Robert Henderson cut in. "Your desire to see the Super Bowl? Because I sent those tickets to Amelia with a personal note acknowledging her specific contributions. Not Westridge Consulting. Not the team. Amelia Turner. James shifted strategies, turning to me with a look of betrayal that was almost comical in its insincerity. Amelia, I'm surprised you'd go behind my back like this. If you had concerns about how I handled this situation, we have internal channels for that. I maintained my carefully cultivated expression of uncomfortable innocence. I didn't go behind anyone's back, James. Mr. Henderson texted me to thank me for my thank you text, and I mentioned I was grateful for the recognition even if I couldn't use the tickets. He asked what I meant, and, well, here we are. The beauty of telling the absolute truth is watching someone who's built their career on manipulation try to find the lie. Andrea stood up suddenly. Mr. Henderson, would you and your colleagues excuse us for just a moment? I need a brief word with James privately. Henderson nodded graciously. Of course. We'll wait in the reception area. As they filed out, Andrea turned to me. Amelia, would you grab James's expense reports from last week from accounting? I nodded and slipped out, catching James's panicked expression as I closed the door behind me. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Andrea gesturing emphatically while James seemed to shrink in his chair. When I returned 10 minutes later with the expense reports, the Henderson team had been invited back in. Andrea had moved to the head of the table and James was nowhere to be seen. Where's James? I asked, setting down the folder. Andrea's expression was grim but composed. James has been asked to clear out his desk. Security is assisting him. My eyes widened. I'd expected consequences but immediate termination. Because of the tickets? The tickets were the symptom, not the disease, Andrea replied. Upon further questioning, it became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. James has been manipulating client relationships, taking credit for team efforts, and misusing company resources for some time. Today simply brought it all to light. She turned to the Henderson team. On behalf of Westridge Consulting, I want to apologize for this unprofessional behavior. This is not how we conduct business, and it will be addressed thoroughly. Henderson nodded. I appreciate your swift action, Andrea, and I want to reiterate that my appreciation was and is for Amelia's exceptional work on our project. Andrea smiled for the first time that morning. On that point, I have an announcement. She turned to me. Amelia, in light of your contributions to the Henderson account and your clear dedication to ethical business practices, I'd like to offer you James's position as Senior Account Director, effective immediately. The room spun slightly. Senior Account Director? That was 2 levels above my current position, with a salary increase that would change my life. Thank you, I managed. I'm honored. It's well-deserved, Henderson added, and I still owe you Super Bowl tickets. Next year? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Absolutely, though after today, watching this meeting might have been more exciting than any football game. As the meeting continued, now focused on the project expansion as originally planned, I caught Andrea watching me with newfound respect. I hadn't sought James's downfall. I'd simply refused to be his victim. In doing so, I'd revealed my own value far more effectively than any self-promotion could have. By lunch, James's name had been removed from the company directory. By end of day, his office had been cleared. The corporate world can be brutally efficient when it chooses to be. That evening, as I boxed up my things to move into my new office, I found myself thinking not about James, but about what comes next. Because while revenge might be sweet, success is infinitely sweeter. The days following James's spectacular flameout were a whirlwind. The empty office that once belonged to him, with its corner window and actual door instead of a cubicle entrance, became mine by Wednesday. Walking in that first morning, setting my small plant on the windowsill and my framed degree on the wall, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and vertigo. Amelia Turner, Senior Account Director, I whispered to myself. running, my fingers along the new nameplate outside the door. 2 promotions in one jump, a 35% salary increase, my own administrative assistant. It was dizzying. Lisa from HR caught me in this moment of private celebration. "Getting comfortable?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Trying to," I admitted. "It's all happened so fast." "Not that fast," she corrected me. "Andrea's had her eye on you for months. Said you were being underutilized. James's situation just accelerated the timeline. That was news to me. I'd always assumed I was invisible to upper management, just another workhorse in the corporate stable. To learn that Andrea Holloway, the human equivalent of a corporate shark, known for her ruthless efficiency and razor-sharp business instincts, had noticed me, that changed everything. My new position came with new responsibilities, of course. Suddenly, I was leading client meetings, instead of preparing materials for them, making strategic decisions instead of implementing someone else's vision, managing a team of 6 people who just days ago had been my peers. "How are you finding the transition?" Robert Henderson asked during our weekly call that Friday. "Quite a change, I imagine." "Challenging but exciting," I replied honestly. "There's a learning curve, but I'm climbing it as fast as I can." He chuckled. "Based on what I've seen of your work ethic, you'll be running the whole company by summer." That Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, my phone buzzed with texts from friends asking if I wanted to come watch the game. For years, I'd organized Super Bowl parties, analyzed every play, screamed myself hoarse cheering for my team. This year, I declined every invitation. "Not watching the Super Bowl?" my dad asked, shocked when he called that afternoon. "Are you sick?" I laughed. "No, Dad. Just prioritizing differently this year." The truth was, I couldn't care less about the game. My mind was on Monday morning, on the presentation I'd prepared for the Henderson account expansion, on the team I was now leading. The real competition, the real victory, wasn't happening on a football field in Phoenix. It was happening in our conference room, in client offices, in my new position of influence. Monday came, and with it, my first major presentation as senior account director. I wore a new suit, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, power colors, and heels that added 2 inches to my height. Small changes, but they matter. How we present ourselves shapes how others perceive us, and perception is currency in the corporate world. The presentation was flawless. My team had worked tirelessly over the weekend, motivated perhaps by the object lesson of James's downfall, or perhaps by my different management style. Where James had ruled through intimidation and credit stealing, I emphasized collaboration and recognition. Every team member who contributed was acknowledged by name in the presentation. Every success was shared. "Exceptional work," Andrea commented afterward, lingering in the conference room after the clients had left. Henderson looked ready to hand over his firstborn child along with an expanded budget. I smiled. The team really stepped up. They're incredibly talented when given the space to shine. She studied me with those calculating eyes that had built her reputation as a corporate force to be reckoned with. "That's exactly why you're sitting in that office now, Amelia. You understand. What James never did. Real leadership isn't about hoarding credit or power. It's about amplifying the strengths of everyone around you." As the weeks passed, my new routine took shape. Earlier mornings, later evenings, but strangely, I felt less exhausted than during my time under James's management. There's a difference between working hard because you're being exploited and working hard because you're building something meaningful. One drains you, the other fuels you. The company spring gala arrived in April, 6 weeks after my promotion. I wore emerald green in a sea of black and navy, another small choice that symbolized bigger changes. No more blending in. No more making myself small to accommodate someone else's ego. "Amelia." Robert Henderson greeted me warmly, champagne in. hand. The woman of the hour. Your team's work on our expansion has exceeded every expectation. Thank you, I said, accepting the compliment without deflection. Another new habit I was cultivating. We're excited about the next phase. He lowered his voice slightly. I've been meaning to ask, did you ever watch the Super Bowl highlights? Your former boss made quite a spectacle of himself on the Jumbotron, I hear. I laughed. You know, I never did. I had more important games to win, and that was the truth. While James had been celebrating his stolen victory, I'd been planning for a whole new playing field, one where I made the rules. The Super Bowl lasts a few hours. My new position, my new trajectory. That was just beginning. Some might call it justice, others karma. I call it reallocation of resources to their highest and best use. In this case, the resource was opportunity, and I was finally getting my fair share. You'd think having your predecessor fired in disgrace would make your new job easier. Clean slate, fresh start, all that. But corporate memory is longer than you might expect, and James left behind more than just an empty office and a stack of poorly organized files. He also left behind a grudge and a direct line to HR. 3 weeks into my new role, Marjorie from HR appeared at my office door just as I was wrapping up a client call. Her expression, that carefully neutral HR look that somehow still manages to convey impending doom, made my stomach clench. "Do you have a minute, Amelia?" she asked, already closing the door behind her. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, mentally scanning through my recent actions for anything that might have triggered an HR visit. Had I mishandled something with my new team? Missed some compliance training? Marjorie settled into the chair, notepad in hand, always a bad sign. "I've received a formal complaint regarding your promotion to senior account director." And there it was. I should have seen this coming. "James," I said. Not a question. She nodded slightly. "The complaint alleges that you deliberately undermined his authority and manipulated the situation with the Henderson account to damage his reputation for personal gain." I took a deep breath, centering myself. This was predictable. Men like James don't accept defeat gracefully. They look for someone to blame. And women who succeed where they failed make perfect targets. "I see," I said calmly. "And what specifically am I being accused of?" Marjorie consulted her notes. "According to the complaint, you intercepted communication between Mr. Bailey and the client, misrepresented his actions to both the client and management, and orchestrated a situation designed to embarrass him professionally. The audacity was almost impressive. James had taken the exact scenario he'd created and simply flipped our roles. Classic Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. A tactic as old as workplace politics itself. "That's quite an accusation," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "May I ask what evidence has been presented to support these claims?" Marjorie shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Bailey provided some email, communications, and his own account of events." "I see. And has Robert Henderson been consulted about this?" "Not yet. This is a preliminary discussion to get your perspective before any formal investigation begins." I nodded, then opened my desk drawer and removed a folder I'd prepared for precisely this moment. Because while James might be predictable in his vindictiveness, I was equally predictable in my preparedness. "In that case, I'd like to submit some materials for your review," I said, sliding the folder across the desk. "This contains the original email from Mr. Henderson explicitly addressing the Super Bowl tickets to me personally. It also includes our text message exchange, where I simply informed him that I appreciated his gift, even though I wouldn't be able to use it due to company policy, as explained to me by James. I never accused James of anything. I merely reported what he told me." Marjorie opened the folder, scanning the printed emails and texts with increasing interest. "Additionally," I continued, "you'll find statements from 3 colleagues who heard James bragging about taking his brother-in-law to the Super Bowl using company resources, as well as copies of the expense reports he submitted for the trip, all Filed before this incident became public. Marjorie's eyebrows rose higher with each document she reviewed. Finally, there's a statement from Andrea Holloway detailing that my promotion was planned prior to this incident, based on my performance over the past year, and merely accelerated by the circumstances of James's termination. I leaned forward, slightly. Marjorie, I understand HR needs to investigate all complaints, but I think you'll find that James's accusations don't hold up under scrutiny. I didn't orchestrate his downfall. He did that himself when he chose to take something that wasn't his and lie about it. Marjorie closed the folder, her expression shifting from neutral to something almost like admiration. You've been very thorough. I've had to be, I replied simply. Women in corporate environments often need to document everything just to be believed. She stood, tucking the folder under her arm. I'll review these materials and discuss next steps with the HR director. In the meantime, continue with your duties as normal. Of course, I said, also standing. And Marjorie, when you speak with the HR director, you might mention that I have no interest in pursuing any counter-complaints against James for his false allegations. I'd prefer to focus on moving forward with my team and our clients. That last part wasn't strictly necessary, but it accomplished two things. It positioned me as the bigger person, and it subtly reminded HR that pursuing James's complaint could open a whole new can of worms they'd rather keep sealed. 3 days later, I received a brief email from HR stating that after careful review, they found no basis for the complaint against me and considered the matter closed. No apology, of course. That would be admitting liability. But the message was clear. James had lost. Again. That afternoon, Andrea stopped by my office. I heard James tried to cause trouble, she said without preamble. I nodded. HR handled it. Of course they did. His accusations were ridiculous. She paused, studying me. You know, most people would have been rattled by something like that. You don't seem fazed at all. I smiled slightly. Let's just say I've learned to anticipate certain reactions. Andrea laughed, a rare sound from someone known more for strategic thinking than humor. This is exactly why you're sitting where you are now, Amelia. You don't just react to situations. You stay 3 steps ahead of them. As she left, I turned to look out my office window at the city below. James had tried to use the system against me, the same way he'd used company policy to justify taking my tickets. But systems only work when they're based on truth, and truth had been on my side from the beginning. His final attempt at retaliation hadn't damaged me. It had only reinforced my position and my reputation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting. It's rising so far above your adversary that they can't even reach you anymore. I picked up my phone and texted Robert Henderson. All clear. Lunch next week to discuss phase 2 of the expansion. His reply came moments later. Looking forward to it. And Amelia? I've never been more certain we backed the right horse. I smiled. Neither had I. The thing about corporate success stories is that word travels fast. In my industry, exceptional talent doesn't stay hidden for long, especially when that talent comes packaged with a juicy story about standing up to a dishonest boss. By early summer, just 4 months after the Super Bowl incident, my phone started, ringing with calls from unfamiliar numbers with familiar area codes. Recruiters. At first, I politely declined. Westridge had given me an opportunity when I needed it most, and loyalty still meant something to me. Besides, I was just settling into my new role, building relationships with my team, finding my rhythm as a senior leader. Then came the lunch that changed everything. So, how are you finding life in the corner office? Robert Henderson asked, cutting into his steak at the kind of restaurant where they don't put prices on the menu. Challenging but rewarding, I replied honestly. There's been a learning curve, but the team's incredible. Makes my job easier. He nodded approvingly. That's what great leaders do. They build teams that make them look good. We chatted about the expansion project, about market trends, about the upcoming industry conference. Normal client agency talk. But something in his manner seemed evaluative, like he was measuring me for something. Finally, as the waiter cleared our plates, Henderson set down his napkin and leaned forward slightly. Amelia, I'm going to be direct with you. Henderson Packaging is opening a new division focused entirely on sustainable solutions. Exactly the market strategy you developed for us. That's fantastic news, I said, genuinely pleased. I'd be happy to put together a proposal for how Westridge can support the launch. He smiled, but shook his head. I'm not looking for agency support. I'm looking for leadership. Specifically, I'm looking for you. The world seemed to pause for a moment as his words sank in. You want to hire me? Away from Westridge? I want you to head the new division as Chief Strategy Officer. Full autonomy, direct report to me, double your current salary, and equity in the new venture. His eyes held mine steadily. I need someone who understands this market inside and out, and who has the backbone to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I sat back, momentarily speechless. Double my salary? Equity? A C-suite position? It was the kind of offer executives spend entire careers positioning themselves for. I'm flattered, I managed finally. But Westridge just promoted me. Andrea took a chance on me. And you've more than justified her faith in you, Henderson replied. But let's be honest. You were undervalued there for years before someone finally noticed. How long until they undervalue you again? His words hit a nerve. Despite my promotion, I was still making less than James had in the same position. I'd seen the numbers during budget reviews. The gender pay gap was alive and well, even in my success story. I'd need some time to think about it, I said carefully. Course. Take the weekend. He slid a folder across the table. All the details are in here. I just have one condition. Which is, when you accept. He smiled at my raised eyebrow. I want you to do it with class. No burning bridges, no revenge, narratives. Just a professional transition that leaves everyone's dignity intact. I found myself smiling. Even after everything that happened? Especially after everything that happened, he said firmly. The best revenge isn't making others look bad. It's being so good they can't ignore you. You've already proven that once. That weekend, I hardly slept. I made pro-con lists. I called my father, my best friend, even my old college mentor. By Sunday night, I knew what I had to do. Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Andrea. You're leaving, she said the moment I closed her office door. Not a question, a statement. I blinked in surprise. How did you? Henderson called me last week to give me a courtesy heads up. Said he was going to try to poach my new star performer. She smiled wryly. I appreciate that he didn't blindside me at least. I haven't made a decision yet, I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Yes, you have, she replied, not unkindly. And you should take it. It's a fantastic opportunity, Amelia, the kind that doesn't come around twice. I hadn't expected this reaction. Support rather than disappointment. Encouragement rather than attempts to retain me. You're okay with this? Of course not. I'm losing an exceptional leader who I just finished promoting. She laughed. But I'm also a businesswoman who understands ambition. This is your moment. Seize it. 2 weeks later, I cleared out my corner office, leaving it even neater than I'd found it. My team threw me a farewell lunch where I thanked each of them individually for their contributions. I met with every client to ensure smooth transitions to their new account directors. I even wrote thank you notes to the executive team, including a particularly heartfelt one to Andrea. Not once did I mention James or the incident that had accelerated my rise. Not once did I gloat or hint at vindication. Because Robert Henderson was right. The best revenge isn't making noise about your success. It's achieving it so undeniably that no explanation is necessary. On my final day, as I carried my small box of personal items through the lobby, I passed the wall of executive portraits. James's photo had been removed months ago, the space filled by someone new. In that moment, I realized his legacy had already faded, while mine was just beginning to take shape. Outside, a black car waited to take me to my new office at Henderson Packaging's headquarters. As I settled into the leather seat, my phone buzzed with a text from Andrea. "Remember us little people when you're running the whole damn industry." I smiled and typed back, "Some bridges are worth keeping intact." And they were. Because true success isn't just about rising above those who tried to hold you down. It's about bringing along those who helped you climb. 1 year to the day after, the Super Bowl incident that changed everything, I sat in my spacious office on the top floor of the Henderson Sustainable Packaging headquarters, reviewing quarterly projections. The division I'd been hired to build was now 30 people strong and growing, with 3 successful product lines and 2 more in development. My team was diverse, motivated, and collaborative, everything I'd envisioned when Robert Henderson handed me the keys to this kingdom. My assistant knocked lightly on my open door. "Your 3 o'clock is here." "Send them in," I replied, closing my laptop. A young woman walked in, resume clutched perhaps a bit too tightly in her hands. Recent graduate, eager eyes, sensible suit that still had that just-purchased look. I recognized myself in her immediately. "Ms. Turner? I'm Zoe Chen. Thank you so much for meeting with me. Please, call me Amelia," I said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "And thank you for coming in. I was impressed by your application. We spoke for 20 minutes about her education, her internships, her ideas for sustainable packaging innovations. She was bright, prepared, and hungry for opportunity. Exactly the kind of talent I was looking to nurture. So," I said finally, "any questions for me?" She hesitated, then asked, "Actually, yes. I've researched your career path, and I'm curious, what was the turning point for you? When did you know you were on the right track?" I smiled, thinking about how to answer. Should I tell her about the stolen Super Bowl tickets? About James's spectacular downfall? About my promotion and subsequent leap to Henderson? Instead, I said, "The turning point was when I stopped letting other people define my value. When I realized that my work spoke for itself, and I just needed to make sure the right people heard it." She nodded earnestly, scribbling in her notebook. "But here's something they don't teach you in business school," I continued. "Success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about creating environments where others can succeed too. That's the real legacy." After our interview concluded, and I'd offered her the position, which she accepted on the spot, my assistant poked her head in again. "You might want to see this," she said, handing me her tablet open to a business news site. The headline read, "Former Westridge executive loses wrongful termination lawsuit, ordered to pay legal costs. James, still fighting battles he'd lost a year ago." According to the article, he'd filed suit against Westridge 6 months after his termination, claiming defamation and wrongful dismissal. The court had not only ruled against him, but had ordered him to pay Westridge's legal fees, citing frivolous litigation without merit. The article mentioned he'd been unable to secure another executive position in the industry, and was reportedly considering relocating to another state to restart his career. I handed the tablet back to my assistant. "Interesting," was all I said. Later, that evening, as I drove home to my new condo, purchased outright with my signing bonus and equity, I thought about James and the strange, twisted path that had led me here. In a way, I owed him a debt. His attempt to steal my recognition had ultimately catapulted me far beyond where I might have been otherwise. There's an old saying that living well is the best revenge. But that's not quite right. The sweetest revenge isn't just living well. It's creating something meaningful from the adversity others place in your path. It's turning obstacles into opportunities so magnificent that those who doubted you can only watch in silence. My phone rang through my car speakers. Robert Henderson. Amelia, just checking in on the Wilson meeting tomorrow. All set, I replied. Proposals are ready, team is prepped. Excellent. He paused briefly. By the way, did you see the news about your former boss? I did. Any thoughts? I considered for a moment. Just one. I hope he finds what he's looking for. That's surprisingly generous, Henderson noted. Not really, I replied. I have everything I could want right here. Wishing him ill would just be unnecessary. We chatted a bit more about business before ending the call. As I pulled into my parking space, my phone buzzed with a text from Andrea. Super Bowl this weekend. Front row seats for you and a guest if you're interested. Long overdue. I laughed out loud. 1 year later, the circle was complete. Count me in, I texted back. But this time I'm bringing my dad. That night, looking out at the city lights from my balcony, I raised a glass to the journey, to the stolen tickets, the calculated countermove, the corporate showdown, and everything that followed. But mostly, I raised a glass to the version of myself who'd refused to stay silent, who'd played the long game, who'd turned injustice into opportunity. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when someone tried to dim your light, you didn't just shine brighter, you illuminated the path for others to follow. And that's a victory no one can ever steal.